I'm good. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. First, some housekeeping. Please ensure that you keep 2 meters from anyone who is not in your bubble. And we recommend that you wear masks when you go into play. This is intended to be a COVID-safe event. Please make good and safe decisions. Please be aware that how you represent yourself during this event will be held against us as a whole. As unfortunate as this is, we will be judged. It is imperative that the actions of one do not overshadow our overall message. Our goal today is to talk about women's right to free expression as provided to all Canadians under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. A right that is currently under threat with Bill C-10 before Parliament. This bill from the Liberal government proposes the removal of Section 4.1 of the Broadcasting Act, the clause that excludes user-generated content from regulation by the CRTC. These reforms, should Bill C-10 pass, will curtail free speech online, ensuring that individuals who challenge government-sanctioned ideology cannot speak out about their criticisms and concerns on social media platforms like Facebook and YouTube. A form of censorship feminists are already experiencing in our attempts to remind the public, media, and politicians that human biological sex is important, real, dimorphic, and immutable. If Bill C-10 passes, the platforms women use to connect with each other and advocate for women's sex-based rights will be forced to censor our words and content under threat of fines from the CRTC. This is a terrifying prospect, considering the threats women already face online when we're talking about anything that our opponents don't like. We face abuse, rape, and death threats, and threats of social and professional alienation. If the federal government are successful, we will be under more pressure to obey than ever. On June 1st, 2021, Feminist Current's Twitter and website were hacked, and Meghan Murphy was doxxed, putting her at significant risk. Canada's leading feminist website was attacked because Meghan stands for and platforms others who stand for women's rights. Articles on the site were replaced with vulgar and juvenile posts, and the Twitter was filled with homophobic and misogynistic slurs. And it's fortunate that Meghan was out of the country so she didn't get hurt, as her home address and her telephone number were released online to the public. The media, by the way, have been silent about this attack on journalism and on women's safety. On June 3rd, in Scotland, a woman named Marion Miller was charged under the United Kingdom's Malicious Communications Act for sharing to Twitter a picture of ribbons in the suffragette colors, in green, white, and violet. The same colors that I am wearing on my sash today. The same colors that you'll see on the sashes of other women who are also here today. That photo has been called homophobic and transphobic, and Marion faces a maximum 2-year sentence in prison under UK law for sharing a photo of ribbons tied to a fence. On June 7th, a woman with COSBAR wrote to Women and Gender Equality, formerly Status of Women, a department that no longer exists. The governmental department responsible for ensuring that women's equality is advanced, to ask what definition of women their ministry uses in their official documents and policy. The definition of woman that they use. Simple question, right? Their response? Wage does not use a specific definition of woman. Let me help you. Adult human female. I want to make very clear that this is a non-partisan issue. It is not about left-wing or right-wing politics. This is about women. This isn't about being liberal or a conservative. It's about being adult human females who experience oppression on the basis of our biological sex and are right to talk about it. Exactly. We can't identify out of our experiences. There isn't a magic wand. Do not misunderstand. We are explicitly and exclusively pro-woman. Any insistence otherwise is a deliberate misrepresentation of what we are saying and our goals. My name is Raine McLeod. I am the WHRC Canada English Country Coordinator. I'm the President of Alberta Women's Advocacy Association, I founded Alberta Radical Feminists. I'm from Calgary, and I know that women are adult human females, and that biological sex is the foundation of our oppression. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Alline Cormier.
Woo! Raine.
My name is Alline Cormier, and I'm honored to be the first provincial coordinator for WHRC Alberta. I'm taking the mic today to address the francophones in the audience. I know that many francophone women in Canada are just as upset about the erosion of our rights as our anglophone sisters.
Mesdames, bonjour et bienvenue à la deuxième manifestation de WHRC en Alberta. Je m'appelle Alline Cormier et j'ai le grand honneur d'être la première coordonnatrice provinciale de WHRC Alberta. La campagne pour les droits humains des femmes est un regroupement de femmes bénévoles partout dans le monde qui se consacrent à la protection des droits des femmes et des filles fondés sur le sexe biologique. La Déclaration pour les droits des femmes fondée sur le sexe biologique réaffirme les droits des femmes et des filles fondés sur le sexe biologique et réclame l'élimination de la discrimination résultant du remplacement de la catégorie sexe par celle d'identité de genre. Cette déclaration compte au-delà de 17 000 signataires dans 132 pays en collaboration avec plus de 300 organismes. Au Canada, il est maintenant permis aux hommes d'utiliser les espaces réservés aux femmes, toilettes publiques, vestiaires, refuges pour femmes et chambres de repos pour femmes. Il est maintenant permis aux hommes de choisir de purger leur peine de prison dans une prison pour femmes. Au Canada, des pédophiles et des hommes reconnus coupables de viol ont déjà été transférés dans des prisons pour femmes. Il est maintenant permis aux hommes d'être en compétition avec les femmes dans la catégorie des femmes lors de compétitions sportives. Les Canadiennes n'ont pas été consultées avant qu'il ne soit décidé de laisser les hommes envahir des espaces qui nous étaient réservés. Cette décision nous a été imposée par des gens qui n'ont évidemment aucune considération pour notre dignité et notre sécurité, ni aucun sens d'équité. Non seulement le gouvernement canadien nous impose cette promiscuité dont nous ne voulons pas dans les espaces non mixtes, mais lorsque nous nous plaignons, nous sommes insultés et on nous dit de nous taire. Mais nous ne nous tairons pas. On en a assez. Au Canada, la liberté d'expression est garantie dans la Charte des droits et libertés, tout autant que la liberté de pensée, de croyance et d'opinion. Si certains veulent croire que les hommes peuvent être des femmes, c'est leur affaire, mais qu'ils cessent de nous imposer leur lubie dépourvue de fondements scientifiques. Être femme, c'est une réalité, pas un sentiment. Il est temps que les hommes et femmes politiques du Canada s'en rappellent. Je tiens à remercier chaleureusement toutes celles qui ont répondu à l'appel à appuyer la cause des femmes aujourd'hui. J'espère vous revoir toutes très bientôt. Thank you to all you marvelous, courageous women who carved time out of your busy schedules to come here today to show your support for women.
I failed to read Alline's biography because I am me. I didn't mean to, sorry. Alline Cormier is a translator and a retired court interpreter who self-published last year a coffee-table book entitled What is a Woman? It's a really good read, it's amazing. As a fundraising project for Vancouver Racial Youth and Women's Shelter, she most recently sent the Prime Minister a copy of Linda Blake's book, Unsporting, How Transactional and Fine Smile Are Destroying Sport, with a card to which almost 90 Canadians from across the country come out of their names. And she just took part in a podcast with the story list that premiered on Friday. Thank you for speaking of it. Heather Mason is a former federal inmate at Grand Valley Institute in Kitchener, Ontario, and a women's prison advocate who has been working tirelessly to stand up for the most vulnerable women in our country, criminalized women, who are being housed with male sex offenders as a direct result of Bill C-16. Heather is unfortunately like to be incarcerated at based on how they identify, except this policy is one-sided, as females who identify as men are denied transfer due to overriding health and safety concerns, hence why I call it a policy for males. I remember when I was first transferred to GBI, the women warned me immediately about Juice, aka Dale, and to stay away from him because he was a creep and harassed the women. I remember saying, "We have men in prison with us?" The women responded, "Yeah, but don't ever call him a he or a man. We have to call him a woman and use female pronouns." That was the beginning of what I would come to know as silencing reality and our speech. I was supposed to believe everything and question nothing, or I was a terrible person. I went along with it out of fear of not getting my parole, and again out of fear of having my parole yanked out from under me when I had to live in a halfway house with Chris, aka Kate. It wasn't until I attended the 2019 Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Society, also known as CASE, conference in Ottawa, Ontario, when I realized women were being silenced and dismissed when they spoke about their experiences of being sexually harassed or assaulted by male transfers. No one wanted to listen to us, and we were called names and intimidated for daring to speak up about what was going on. I remember I was called transphobic by the executive director of CASE at the time for asking them to set up a phone line for the women inside. CASE and EFRI also stopped asking me to speak on panels for them after that. I later learned by the women inside that CSC was bullying and intimidating them, as well as threatening to place them in segregation or maximum security if they had concerns and didn't know how to deal with the transfers. Staff also threatened to put bullying into the women's paperwork because they locked Matthew Hart, a prolific serial pedophile, out of their house after he sexually assaulted and harassed some of the women. They were scared of Hart and didn't want to be around him. They ended up listening to CSC and letting him in the house. What goes into your paperwork, the Parole Board of Canada sees, and it impacts your ability to get parole. The women know CSC and CASE's stance on the trans policy. They've let us all know, and they continue to cite Bill C-16 as the reason why males are allowed to be incarcerated with us. CASE spouts their mantra, trans women are women, and now the women inside and outside in the halfway houses have no one to turn to. They are not only fearful of not getting parole, but of having their only support in the community pulled from them. Elizabeth Fry Societies, also known as EFRI, operates the halfway houses in the community. So it is a very valid concern that these women have. The women have witnessed the silencing and bullying and intimidation that has been going on since they implemented this policy in 2017. They've also saw firsthand what Stephen Melbacher was allowed to do. They also seen how nobody offered support to any of his victims, even after he was charged with sexual assault and criminal harassment. To this day, CASE, the only national organization in Canada that works for criminalized women, pretend they don't know what is going on. I can't help but think of how predatory men in my life and the lives of the women that I know would try to silence us by threatening their victims so that they don't get caught for their crimes and end up in jail. Today, I see that same predatory, abusive behavior happening to criminalized women by our very own Canadian government and the organization that is funded to support us. Me Too means nothing when you don't believe us and don't want us to speak about our experience. Thank you to all you brave women for speaking out, and thank you again for asking me to come speak. Enjoy your day.
For all of you who are wondering out there, there's no counter-protest. It's simply that there's another unrelated protest across the street. We apologize for the sound issues.
It's worth noting that Indigenous women are representative of 4% of the Canadian population and over 40% of the incarcerated women in our country. So they're disproportionately affected by the inclusion of men in women's prisons, particularly violent offenders. Kathleen Lowrey is an associate professor of anthropology at the University of Alberta. Reading Gallup Knight's website is what raised her consciousness about gender ideology starting around 2014-2015. She published her first piece about these issues in Feminist Current in 2018. In 2020, students' objections to her feminist views led to her dismissal from an administrative post within the U of A. She does not recant. Welcome, Kathleen.
All right, hello, Rebel Women. It's a privilege to be here in Calgary with you, live and in person. It took courage for all of us to come here today because Canada is in the grip of a dangerous religious mania, with respect to which we are heretics. Some of you already know that this past week, my faculty union told me that because I question the validity of transgender identity, I create a discriminatory workplace environment. Just me, this squashy middle-aged lady you see before me. I manage it on my own. I can tell you that nobody else on campus is raising even a peep about the validity of transgender identity. So I'm conjuring up that scary atmosphere all by myself, like I'm a witch or something. Now, this is my faculty union saying this. The final backstop for my academic freedom. This academic freedom is written into my employment contract, but if the university abrogates that freedom, it's the job of the faculty union to file a grievance about it. Now, as you know, I have been dismissed because of student complaints that I said out loud that I was not a faithful adherent of the Church of Genderology, and I didn't think anybody else needed to be either. My faculty union is grieving this dismissal as they are, but it's clear they're very uncomfortable doing so, and they want to be sure the world knows that their official position is that questioning the validity of transgender identity is a terrible thing to do. They wouldn't issue this kind of a statement if I challenged the validity of gravity. They might think I was silly, they might think I wasn't going to become a famous scholar, but they wouldn't issue a statement saying that challenging the validity of gravity creates an unsafe working environment for anybody.
Yes.
If transgender identity is a thing in the world, the way gravity is a thing in the world, nobody would care if a lone academic challenged its validity. They might say, well, she's probably a crank, but who knows, she might be onto something. That's ordinary practice in academia. But we are not in the realm of ordinary practice. None of you here today need me to tell you that. What's happening to me in academia is happening also to all of you in your lines of work, in your friend groups, in your families. It's happening to all of us. As so many people around us affirm their faith in gender identity, and multitudes more make polite noises about this magical force, we say we think gender is just a set of social and power relations that hurt people, women especially, and that genderism treats these social and power relations as if they were sacred. We say that this is a religious belief, and as such, should be kept separate from the state. We say we don't want children baptized in the system of belief, nor proselytized about it in school. We insist that we want to live as secular skeptics about genderism, and that we want to be able to talk to others about the reasons for our secularism and our skepticism. The Canadian The evidence from secular nations like Canada is that it can be done and done well. Until the advent of the Church of Genderology, that is. We see the ramping up of a whole ancient and familiar apparatus of book banning, which Linda knows something about, of witch hunting, which I know something about, and many of you here know something about, of heresy sniffers, and calls to recant and repent on Twitter, and to display the emblems of the faith, that ever-changing flag, and utter the creeds. That trans women are women, and Martine Rothblatt is their prophet, and declare eternal fealty to the cause. This all comes with the backing, more forceful every year, of the state. Everyone in public office, all major parties, are united in terror, putting each other wrong, and earning the wrath of the trigger zealots. Canada was supposed to be a place you could come to get away from that sort of thing. I think many of us, myself included, had a sort of conceited sense of Canada as a country where that kind of thing would be impossible. And yet here we are. That's the bad news. The good news is we humans, and especially women, have faced this many times in history, so we know what to do. We stand up to it. We say we don't agree, and we keep saying we don't agree.
Yes!
Humans have done this before. Women have done this before. Since they think we're witches anyway, let's conjure up our host of companions, the spirits of brave women past, to say with us, back off,
Yeah!
knock it off, and most importantly, no, we won't shut up.
No!
Barbara Kay has been a columnist for the National Post since 2003 and writing, teaching, and editing since the 60s. She is a co-writer with Linda Blade on the book Unsporting, How Trans Activism and Science Denial Are Destroying Sport. That's not the last time you're going to hear about that from me today, by the way. It's an awesome book and you should read it. She is not here in person today, but has sent this speech, which I will be reading.
Barbara Kay.
Titled Alberta Women Conference, June 13th, 2021. I am honored to have this opportunity to speak today. My subject is complicity with trans activism by alleged feminists in high places and the women erasure this complicity results in. Linda Blade has spoken to you about women erasure in the world of sport, and I will offer two more examples. One is women erasure that took place at Canada's March 8th International Women's Day Conference. The other is women erasure in a government-funded advocacy group whose mandate is, or was, to support and advocate for the rights of women in prison. On International Women's Day, March 8th, under the patronage of Mariam Monsef, Minister for Women and Gender Equality, WAGE, our government held a remote access 2-day summit to mark International Women's Day, IWD. The promotional material observed that women have faced steep job losses during the pandemic and shouldered the burden of unpaid work at home. Therefore, hashtag feminist recovery was to be Canada's 2021 uncontroversial theme for IWD. The conference should have gone without a hitch, but thanks to a collision between sex-based rights and gender rights that the government has refused to come to grips with, it didn't. The chat rooms following each presentation became politicized with regard to the word woman. On the first day, a new Canadian, whose first language was not English, posed civil and reasonable questions to the organizers, such as, I just want to understand how we define feminism. I definitely include trans men, but not sure if we should include trans women. Not sure how to phrase this correctly. I am just asking, do we define on sex or gender? As I believe as sex, women have different issues than based on gender relating to our bodies being female. No conference spokesperson answered her questions. Not ever. But even posing these questions, the woman was treated with hostility and ejected from the chat room by the moderator. She was called, quote, hateful, trans-misogynistic, and a TERF, a highly derogatory term. The term females was not permitted. Certain topics were off limits, particularly issues that applied systematically to women in other regions of the world, such as sex-selective abortion, female genital mutilation, and preeclampsia, which in developing countries is 7 times higher than here.
Woo!
One woman asked, how do we speak about issues that only affect females, FGM, pregnancy, menstruation, etc.? She received the testy response, we are being respectful towards, all caps, women. Their sexual organs are not important. Another woman responded, some men also have menstruation. She finally asked, how come using the word female is wrong? It specifies issues that are still here. How can we discuss those without using the terminology needed? Excellent questions, but projected into a purposeful void. Symbolically, as it relates to our general culture, the questioner felt so isolated and shunned, she withdrew from the conference in frustration, leaving the forum to the bullying trans activist allies, aided by the government or its proxies, on International Women's Day. CAPES. CAPES stands for Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies. This is the organization that Heather was speaking about during her speech. Elizabeth Fry was a pioneer in advocacy for more humane accommodation of women in prison at a time when they were treated with great brutality. CAPES oversees a dozen or so regional branches. Up until 2019, CAPES' mission was to serve, quote, women in prison, and their mission statement said so. Until their mission statement today says they serve, quote, people in prison. As you may know, it is now government policy that men who identify as women, or say they do, are permitted to request transfer to women's prisons, where conditions are more pleasant, because violence is so much less of an issue in than in men's prisons. These biological males are not required to undergo sex reassignment surgery, as used to be the case, or even embark on a hormone program. Self-identification and a pronoun change suffice. Amongst those biological males who have transferred to women's prisons, there have been a serial pedophile, a serial sex offender, a contract killer, a child killer, and a murderer. There are certain to be an escalating number of dangerous imposters happy to gain such a naive system. At CAPE's 2019 annual meeting, supported by members of the quote-unquote Lived Experience Committee, a former prisoner recounted her traumas and sexual harassment in the prison at the hands of a male-bodied pedophile with a history of hundreds of girl victims. She noted that the Correctional Services of Canada had dismissed her complaints, threatening to isolate her and labeling her requests for help as bigotry. In a room of more than 60 women, mostly CAPES directors, staffers, and regional volunteers, her story was met with total silence. She was ushered from the room in tears. Once she was gone, comments began to buzz, such as, I'm sorry for what happened to her, but you don't need a vagina to be a woman. And I'm concerned about the transphobia in this room. The discussion reverted to the need for trans women's full support from CAPES, as though the women had not spoken at all. That day, CAPES adopted a blanket position of trans inclusion. That, among other things, would come to mean supporting the transfer of any trans-identifying males from men's prisons to women's prisons. It was a pivotal moment of disillusionment for a number of CAPES stakeholders. They withdrew and have consolidated themselves into a fledgling organization called Strength and Sisterhood, which deserves public support. As the old saying goes, with friends like these, who needs enemies?
Woo!
For anyone who's having a hard time hearing, transcripts will be available online, probably tomorrow.
Thank you, Nancy.
After identifying and living as a trans man for years, Benji accepted that she is a lesbian and re-identified with her womanhood. She is a lesbian and detransition community builder who is here all the way from Ontario to speak with us today. Please welcome Benji. Hi. Hi, Benji.
Thank you for coming!
Yay, Benji!
Thanks for having me. Imagine a young Canadian woman who has just come to terms with the fact that she is a lesbian. The first thing she'll likely want to do is meet others like her. In Canada, other than the Vancouver Lesbian Collective, there are no lesbian-specific events, groups, or spaces. So she will probably go online, as the rest of us now do during the age of COVID. This is when she will notice the extreme censorship of lesbians online. Twitter has many vocal lesbians. However, stating that you are only attracted to females can get you temporarily or permanently suspended. Instagram and Tumblr have fallen in line with this recently. many lesbians who've been removed from these platforms seek refuge in private Facebook groups, only for those groups to be reported and removed as well. So while you can try to create a public presence or a private community as a lesbian on social media, you do so knowing that at any moment you could lose it. Reddit, once a host of a bustling lesbian community, from late bloomer lesbians to butch lesbians to lesbian dating advice, is now decimated. In June 2020, the platform removed thousands of hateful subreddits. You may wonder, what could be hateful about lesbian discussions? The answer is that we vocalize that our orientation is based on biological sex. In its place, we have quote-unquote inclusive lesbian subreddits, which host memes about how males who label themselves quote-unquote lesbians should have a right to sex with homosexual females.
Go!
So if all of our public places, like dyke bars or lesbian university groups are gone, where can lesbians meet? The honest answer is that it's really difficult for Canadian lesbians to gather, socialize, or organize as a distinct group. Often, our only option is queer women's events, groups, or spaces, which almost always include males and often center bisexuality to the exclusion of homosexuality. We used to have dyke marches that were female only. They now center bisexuality, and females are meant to see this as progress. It's gotten to the point where a lesbian at an LGBT event could face severe consequences for vocalizing that she is a homosexual. As a result, many lesbians stay home rather than bite their tongues about their sexuality in spaces where they should be able to express themselves freely. What are the consequences for lesbians who don't bite their tongues? In many progressive environments, the concept of sexuality is based on sex and not gender identity is seen as regressive, so the appropriate response is to shun or punish the lesbian who expresses she is a homosexual. This can take various forms. An entire social circle blocking you overnight, being removed from women's groups or LGBT groups online or in your area, people contacting your employer to report that you are hateful, professional associations removing you from their ranks for spreading bigotry. Your child's school will no longer let you volunteer. You will be harassed by colleagues until you quit your job. These actions are seen not only as acceptable lesbophobia, but as justice. I know of one lesbian who went to a queer women's event in Toronto, and when she spoke up, saying that this event seems to be entirely for bisexuals and focuses exclusively on heterosexual sex, everyone shamed her. They tried to correct her that lesbians can enjoy heterosexual sex, and called her a bigot. Then most of them blocked her or unfriended her, some of whom were professional relationships. Imagine being a young lesbian in that room, witnessing the results of speaking up for homosexual women. Simply put, the dominant narrative has been set by LGBT organizations and influencers. They operate on the assumption that lesbians are privileged over queer women, and we don't need our own spaces anymore. The leading LGBT organizations and influencers have also rewritten female homosexuality as including males. They've even gone so far as to rewrite our histories, claiming that lesbians have always included males in our sexuality. LGBT people have always disagreed with one another. Within the LGBT, we have always expressed unpopular opinions about the community. We are now expected to be a monolith, to only ever agree. So why hasn't the average Canadian heard about this? Because of the extreme consequences for anyone who opposes this narrative, lesbians in Canada have been unable to publicly oppose this narrative en masse. Even if a large group of Canadian lesbians decided to risk the risks were worth it, where could we vocalize ourselves? On social media, the options are limited, and once a post gets a certain amount of traction, it would likely be removed. Traditional news media in Canada is unlikely to cover this, and they prefer to follow the sanctioned narrative set by LGBT organizations, that we are a monolith and accept that lesbian sexuality includes males. We have entered an era where homosexuality has once again become this love that dare not speak its name. This Pride Month, take a moment to tell a lesbian you know that even if she feels alone, you support her right to find others like herself and to express her female-exclusive sexual orientation. Linda Blade is our next distinguished speaker. She is a coach and a president from Athletics Alberta. She explicitly asked me not to read this, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah!
I'm not very obedient, you know me.
No!
She has a PhD in kinesiology from Simon Fraser University, a chartered professional coach designation in track and field, and is a former champion heptathlete. In May, her book, Unsporting, How Trans Activism, Sides Denial Are Destroying Sport, co-written by Barbara Kay, available at unsporting.com, was released and is available now. If anyone is qualified to talk about the differences between male and female bodies, it's Linda. Welcome, Linda.
everybody. My name is Linda Blade, as Raine said, and I live and work in Edmonton. I'm a sport performance coach and serve as elected President of Athletics Alberta. Let me tell you about Alberta. Woo! Alberta is a province of Canada that prides itself on independent thinking. Woo! The very name Alberta was taken from one of the daughters of Queen Victoria back in 1905. It strikes me that this daughter, Princess Louise Caroline Alberta, was intelligent, outspoken, and curious. Her nickname in youth was Little Miss Wine. Well, I guess what? I want to tell you something. Women who came after Caroline Alberta were also good at asking why.
Yeah.
100 years ago, 5 women decided to speak out because they realized that female citizens in Canada were not considered to be human persons under the law. Just like Louise Alberta, they were asking why. Why are women in Canada not considered persons? Why are women in Canada not able to serve in all bodies of leadership, including the Senate? Here are the names of the suffragettes, the 5 of them. Henrietta Muir Edwards.
Woo! Woo!
Nellie McClung.
Yeah!
Louise McKinney.
Woo!
Irene Parlby.
Yeah!
And Emily Murphy.
Woo!
When they first got together and started making some noise, they were called the Alberta 5.
Yeah!
Next, after withstanding challenges, they persisted and were called the Valiant 5.
Woo!
And finally, after winning their case and thereby ensuring that women in Canada are indeed to be recognized as persons in law with equal rights as men to the ballot box and to leadership positions, they were called the Famous 5.
Woo!
It was specifically about equality of the sexes. We're talking about biological sex.
Yeah!
The term gender identity did not exist.
No!
Well, now, a century later, there are many more of us, right?
Woo!
So today, on June 13, 2021, we stand together to once again ask why. Why are the sex-based rights of female persons in Canada being negotiated away?
Why?
Why are the Canadian leaders in government and society so quick to capitulate to an ideology that seeks to secure unimpeded access of male bodies into women's sports? Why?
Why?
Women's prisons?
Why?
Women's hospital wards?
Why?
Women's shelters?
Why?
Women's washrooms?
Why?
I can speak for women in sports specifically. In Canada today, females in sports, female athletes are being told that we are bigots if we object to having male bodies self-declare into our competitions. Yes, imagine that. Even though the male body has enormous advantages over women in 1,000 ways, including they're stronger by 30 to 60%, especially in upper body strength, more explosive by 33%, running faster by 10 to 15%, kicking harder by 20%, punching harder by 160%, and bigger skeletal frames. My new book, if you find my new book at unsporting.com, you can learn more. Like the famous 5 of old, we gather today in this new century to serve notice that we will not stop asking why until we fully protect our sex-based rights.
Yeah!
Female persons of today, as well as future generations of Canadian women and girls, have the right to live in dignity and in security. My friends, let them count on us to fight the battle for them.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah!
Identities don't play sports. Bodies play sports. Save women's sports.
Save women's sports!
Women's sports.
Save women's sports! Save women's sports!
Thank you.
Woo!
Can you just hold it with the, hold that, yeah. Thank you.
Women won't leave!
That concludes our scheduled speakers, so thank you so much to everyone who took the time to attend today's event, either in person or online. We want all of you to know that this will not be the last Alberta Women's Speak.
That's right!
So, here's to women's rights.
Woo!
Most recently vindicated Maya Forstatter said, "Be braver today than you were yesterday."
Yes!
We will now open the mic to any woman who would like to speak, but please limit your remarks to 2 minutes or less. Thank you so much, everyone.
Get the crossbar sign, too.
Anybody want to speak?
I will.
Have some sass to say?
Lara! Woo! Lara!
Hi, I'm Lara Forsberg. I'm from Lethbridge, Alberta.
Can you help?
I play roller derby.
Woo!
We're hearing some serious problems happening on the roller derby track because of men hurting our players, our female players. And we're told to be inclusive. Well, I was excluded from my roller derby team for being a woman.
Wow.
And having an opinion. I want to go on about the Elizabeth Fry Society because when I lived in Calgary, I was helped by the Elizabeth Fry Society through the Women in Need store that provided clothes for women who needed to find work. Now that store is closed down, and I'm not sure what the Elizabeth Fry Society is doing now to help women. After I hear that women are no longer served, but people are served. I just want to say, right from the Elizabeth Fry Society page, it says, their services are women-centered, ensuring women and girls receive services and supports that respect their social, economic, physical, and cultural realities. And based on the assumption that women know their own realities.
Yes.
And yet they're shutting up the women they're there to protect. Mostly First Nations women.
Woo! But why do they get our tax dollars if they don't have...
Why do they get any money from us? Trans women are not sent to period huts. They are not child brides. Genital mutilation is a female problem. So is forced marriage. Rape and impregnation of child marriages too. In Alberta, the Mennonites in my community have girls who are not educated. They are not given any services when they are raped and given incest situations to deal with in very young places. And we don't even talk about that. We're too busy figuring out what a woman is.
Not a man!
This is from a woman in jail. I was forced to live in a unit with a self-proclaimed transgender. Who will remain nameless. I don't say it like that out of disrespect or transphobia. I'm a lover of and a member of the LGBTQI community, and so are my friends, and I am friends with many trans people. However, the lack of protocol CSC, Correctional Service of Canada, has in place allows any man to proclaim trans status to be transferred into a women's prison to do their time as a woman. And they're hurting women and children. At Grand Valley Institute, we have women and children who are in a very safe state, and now they have guns pointed at them because there are men there who are unsafe
children, and now the children and the women are afraid because they have a wolf in their midst. What is Elizabeth Bride doing for these women? Nothing.
Nothing!
This is a dereliction of duty by Elizabeth Bride and other female institutions. The Andromesia Society. Why do they have to include trans men in that? Or trans women? Sexism disguised as diversity. Unfortunately, the rights of trans identified males are to abridge the rights of the most marginalized women in Canada in female prison. First Nations women are the ones being sexually assaulted. Furthermore, the rights of lesbian youth to discover their own identity without the heteronormative or heterosexual queer colonizing lens of white men. Woo! And sexist women. In Canadian schools as well. Children are in jeopardy. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for letting me speak.
Would anyone else like to take the mic?
Anybody who would like to speak is more than welcome to. If you find that it is too hard, you don't have to do it on camera. We're here to listen to you.
We're here to listen.
That's what feminism is here for.
Yeah.
Okay? Anybody else who would like to? I'm just going to leave this right here. Anybody else who would like to? Please, please come talk. It's okay. No, that was great. You don't have to. Sorry.
If you're watching online, we would love for you to attend our next event. This is about women. This is about empowerment. This is not about hate. This is about love and sex-based rights. And thank you so much for watching today. This is an empowering time. If you'd like to visit any of our websites, Away, Cause Bar, the Women's Human Rights Campaign, there are so many women's groups out there who are here for you. We are your sisters, and we are here to listen and support you. And that is what we want to do for our groups, for our women, for our sex-based adult female humans. That's what a woman is. If you want to reach out to us on Facebook, on Twitter, please do. We would love to hear your thoughts and have you join us in this fight to protect our rights as women and as girls.